ETV, The State, the Greenville News, the Island Packet, the Beaufort Gazette, the Sun News of Myrtle Beach, the Herald of Rock Hill, and the Item of Sumter present ETV Debates. Tonight, Republican candidates for Lieutenant Governor. And now, your moderator, Dean of USC's College of Mass Communications and Information Studies, Charles Bierbauer.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's primary debate among the Republican candidates for Lieutenant Governor. Joining me tonight to ask questions of the candidates are Maya Prabhu from the Sun News and Andy Shane of the State. Candidates joining us this evening are Mike Campbell of Columbia, Ray Moore of Columbia, Pat McKinney of Charleston, and Henry McMaster of Columbia. Before we begin tonight, brief ground rules. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the questions, and if necessary, I will allow a 30-second rebuttal. We drew names when the candidates arrived this evening for the order of questioning. We will start then with the first question, although a question to each of you, but I'll start with Mike Campbell. Gentlemen, you're running for an office that may be empty for the next 6 or 7 months. The last elected lieutenant governor was forced to resign. His successor is leaving for apparently greener pastures. The next in line, the president pro tem, has decided to step down rather than be forced to be lieutenant governor. After this election, the office will no longer be independently elected. It's a part-time job and the pay is only so-so. So would you respond in this sense? The obvious question is, why do you want it? But the more relevant question seems to be, what singular thing would you do to lift this office above marginal relevancy? Mr. Campbell.
Well, first of all, I want to thank ETV for having us here this evening and for joining my opponents. I ran in 2006, and we ran for this at this office. Ran for this office at that time, and one thing that that we were running on at that point was government restructuring. We wanted to see the governor and lieutenant governor run together on a ticket, and that was something I even continued to advocate for after the campaign was over. But today, something happened in 2006 that really made this office a lot more relevant. Something that was basically a ceremonial position became more relevant when it took on the Office on Aging. The Office on Aging deals with all of our seniors issues in the state of South Carolina, and as we all know, our seniors and our population of seniors is growing. We're living more, and thank goodness we have so many retirees moving into the state. But having said that, their issues are going to become more prevalent. And having lost my father to Alzheimer's and done some work with the South Carolina Alzheimer's Association is something I have some experience with.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Yes, indeed. It is a last election for Lieutenant Governor. And we know in 2018 the Lieutenant Governor will run with the Governor. So this election has a lot of symbolic value, I think, as well. And I'm running on a strong platform of school choice, trying to grow private or Christian or homeschooling as an alternative to government schooling. And that was what got me into the race when Glenn McConnell announced he wasn't going to run again. It's an election about traditional values. We give the vote. I think the voters would have a chance if they were to support me in this race to express an opinion about traditional values, about our Judeo-Christian heritage, about the future of our children, the future of our education system, and I'm the candidate for expressing those views. So this is a symbolic election as much as an election for the office.
Mr. McKinney.
Yes, as the person who has spent 43 years in the private sector, I've never really aspired to a career in politics, but I decided to offer for the office of Lieutenant Governor because I have a passion to serve. And the things that I would like to work on as the Lieutenant Governor are pro-business policies that will help our small business community through lower taxes, reduced regulations, and then to be the strong advocate for our seniors. Our Office on Aging is the responsibility of the Lieutenant Governor, and it's something that I take very seriously, and that's why I'm the only candidate that has actually put forth a plan to advocate for our seniors. And that plan includes nutrition and wellness. It includes support for our senior veterans, a very critical issue that's been in the news a lot lately. And then finally, to offer through the Office of Lieutenant Governor an office of innovation so that we can encourage and promote our nonprofits throughout our communities.
Mr. McMaster.
Well, we do have 4 years, and the next 4 years are critical for economic development in this country, and especially South Carolina. And we're going to need experienced leadership at the State House to work with the General Assembly and the governor in getting things done. And I'm the candidate who has had that experience. I was Ronald Reagan's first prosecutor, and that prepared me to bring the Obamacare lawsuit. I stopped North Carolina from taking too much water out of the Catawba River, stopped the ACLU from suing and threatening to sue the town and city councils who wanted to open their meetings with a prayer to Jesus. Also, I convicted the 6 people who took the $278 million and squandered it in Carolina Investors in HomeGo. So I've had that kind of experience. We convicted them. But we've got to make the seniors safe and secure in their homes as long as possible. We've got to be an advocate for small business, and we've got to stop D.C., stop Washington, with helping Governor Haley stop Washington from intruding on our rights in this state.
Thank you. Andy Shane has the next question, and Andy, you'll start with Mr. Moore.
Good evening. There's been a lot of discussion in the campaign about faith and religion. Mr. Moore, you brought up Christian schooling. Mr. McKinney, you raised your faith in one of your campaign ads. What is the appropriate role of religion and religious organizations in this statewide office?
I'm a pastor, as you know, have nearly 4 years in congregational ministry or Army chaplain or director of a Christian ministry. So I believe Christian values belong in government. I do not believe, or do not accept the conventional view that most hold today of the separation of church and state. That view historically only meant that we'd have no Christian or a denomination. The government would not recognize or sponsor one Christian denomination, but that does not mean that we cannot have Christian values and permeating public policy. So if I'm elected, I will try to bring Christian values into public life. I will not separate God and government, even though we do have a valid view of separation of church and state in the sense that we don't have a sponsored denomination or religion.
Mr. McKinney, you can respond to that question.
Certainly. Yes, though I am a businessman and that is the primary reason for my running, I'm very, very proud to say that my faith is the compass that guides me. And going back through our country's history, faith has been an important part all the way from the founders up until today. And I'm very proud to say that I simply will choose to live my faith in elective office.
Mr. McMaster.
Well, Dean, Andy, my public career has been that of a prosecutor. 4 years as the top federal prosecutor appointed, first federal prosecutor Ronald Reagan appointed when he became president, and also 8 years as the chief prosecutor for the state of South Carolina. And I understand the Constitution, and the Constitution guarantees a right to freedom of religion. That is why when the ACLU sued the town council of Great Falls, I stepped in and told them that you go ahead and pray to Jesus. If that's the way you pray at home, you pray that way in public, and we'll fight with you to stop those people from suing you. And the Supreme Court has finally started seeing it our way.
Mr. Campbell.
Well, obviously, I think that it goes beyond just politics, talking about someone's faith. Your faith is who you are. It describes you as an individual, and it shows that you have some core convictions and some core principles about yourself. And so many times today, and you know, we live in such a society today that everything has to be politically correct, and people will jump on you about your faith, but I think you need to stay steadfast in your faith. And as Pat said, the framers of our Constitution, they framed our Constitution based on their religious beliefs and their belief in God. And that's something that if I'm elected Lieutenant Governor, I will certainly take to the Lieutenant Governor's office.
Next question is from Maya Prabhu, and you'll start with Mr. McKinney.
Hello. While the Atlantic Beach Bike Fest is a Grand Strand event, the violence that happened Memorial Day weekend, where there were 8 shootings, where 3 people died and 7 people were injured, has become statewide and even nationwide news. Local officials on the Grand Strand believe that increasing law enforcement is what's needed to get things under control. Governor Haley has said that law enforcement was as good as it needed to be and the state sent 273 officers to the Grand Strand to help our local officers. What is your position on the future of Bike Fest? Do you support Governor Haley's position that Bike Fest should end, or do you think law enforcement is needed because local officials don't expect the event to end?
Well, I was in Charleston when Hurricane Hugo hit in 1989, and we had a very serious law enforcement issue after that. So I very much respect, through the leadership of our local officials there, the impact that good law enforcement can have. That said, South Carolina is a family-friendly state. And from what I've seen, I would support Governor Haley's position. Bike Fest is not a family-friendly activity. Myrtle Beach and the state of South Carolina needs to promote family-friendly events.
Mr. McMaster.
Yes, I support Governor Haley 100%. I think she did exactly the right thing. When I was in the Attorney General's office one time, I was going to go down there and take a look at it, and the chief of SLED and all the rest said it's too dangerous. You can't go unless you go by helicopter or something like that. We just got to cut that out. As we mentioned, the freedom of religion, there's also a freedom of association, but you got to draw the line somewhere. Those people they've just gone over the line. They are destroying the beach for people who come from many miles away to go down there. Myrtle Beach is one of our industries of production in South Carolina. It produces all sorts of money, all sorts of commerce. Another one's the Port of Charleston, which is a great institution. But we've got to protect the economy of South Carolina, and a large part of that is tourism. And if we let things like that keep going, people will quit coming, and then we'll be in deep trouble. I support Governor Haley 100%.
Mr. Campbell.
Well, this is actually an issue that I've had a little bit of experience with. I served as the Vice Chairman of the Department of Natural Resources Board under Governor Sanford for 8 years, and as such, I also chaired the Law Enforcement Advisory Committee, which helped oversee law enforcement on behalf of the department and worked closely with the leadership there. We, at that time, had to send our officers down there to help work Bike Fest. At the same time, I was also a small business owner in the area. We owned a chain of Wendy's restaurants that were actually located in the area, and we used to experience all kind of problems and had to bring extra security into our restaurants to take care and prevent the issues that were going on at Bike Fest. Governor Haley was exactly right on her stance on this issue. Part of the problem is, and I'm glad to be the candidate in this race that has actually stated taking care of law enforcement as a part of my platform, but anytime you have to take your law enforcement officers out of the field and send them to an event like that, then you have a manpower shortage in the area where they're supposed to be concentrating on, and that's never a safe situation.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
I support Governor Haley's position and generally agree with what the gentleman said previous to my comments, but I'm more concerned about the war against our children through the leftist-controlled, state-run public school system. You may remember this scene from Lord of the Rings when Gandalf said, "War is determined against you whether you want it or not." And we're having a terrible problem now in government schools with indoctrination of our children through things like Common Core. That's the war I'm concerned about, a war against our children. And if I would do everything I can to advance and grow alternative educational models such as private, Christian, or homeschooling. I don't think the public school system can reform itself, but it might be able to if they had real alternatives and didn't have a monopoly.
Gentlemen, a question about your campaign ads. I've been watching them, and I'm trying to reconcile the things that you are proposing or espousing and the constitutional role of the Lieutenant Governor's office. So let me ask specific questions to each of you. Mr. McMaster, Harry Truman, as you know, said of Washington, if you want a friend, get a dog. So you've got boots in your ads with you. But the question here, the family watchdog, as you say, is you're talking about, your words, we've got to stop Washington at our doorstep. In what context as Lieutenant Governor?
Well, the Lieutenant Governor can support the governor in that context. Dean, as you know, as you just mentioned, the Constitution says that the Lieutenant Governor has one duty, or it specifies one duty, and that is to preside over the Senate. And there's been a lot of that talk lately because of events there. The statute gives the Lieutenant Governor the authority and responsibility for the Office on Aging, which is an enormous responsibility, given that we have about 900,000 seniors over 65 today, and in 16 years we're going to have twice that many. We're not ready for it. But that's a statutory duty, but it doesn't put any limit on what the Lieutenant Governor can do. And so I would use the position as one of strong advocacy for small business, for the Office on Aging and protecting the seniors and keeping them in their homes safe and secure. There's no limit on what the Lieutenant Governor can do if he has experience and knows how to get it done, and he can help the governor.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, I can't find any of your ads. Maybe I'm missing them. If so, enlighten me. If not, why are you missing out on the opportunity for some hyperbole?
Well, we've been doing a lot of digital stuff. We are not on the air, but we have been out talking about this. But to go to your point about the office, the Lieutenant Governor's office, yes, you know, one of the things that, and I've had this conversation with Lieutenant Governor McConnell about the Office on Aging, and you know, we can stand up here and we can propose, and I think everybody that's ever run for Lieutenant Governor has gone out there and proposed a million wonderful things that they're going to do if they're elected Lieutenant Governor, and unfortunately the office is just not structured that way. And one thing that the Lieutenant Governor pointed out to me was, even though that this position is classified as a part-time job, it certainly takes a full-time commitment to do the job, particularly to do the Office on Aging. And if you start concentrating on too much, and it doesn't mean don't use the bully pulpit of the office to advocate on other things that and other challenges that face our state, because we certainly need to do that, but if you do that, somewhere along the line, something's going to fall through the cracks, and I'll be darned if on my watch the seniors are going to fall through the cracks.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, your ad says, as Lieutenant Governor, I will stand up to the Obama administration and fight Common Core. That would strike me as being in the office of the Superintendent of Education. What's the Lieutenant Governor's role?
Well, as I said, I would it's a part-time job, and each one of us are talking about the other things that we would be doing. So I want to become an advocate for the children, and I think the Common Core agenda is harming our children. But let me address the constitutional duties as well. As overseer of the Office of Aging, I would try to bring churches, pastors, and religious institutions into the process of caring for our seniors. Lieutenant Governor McConnell talked a lot about the need for free market, private, and nonprofits to support the Office of Aging or the aging senior population, since it's not going to be possible that our taxes can keep up with this need. So I would bring that into the Office of Aging and try to engage churches in a better way than they have done up to now.
Mr. McKinney, your ad says, when career politicians try to grow government, I'll say no. The Lieutenant Governor doesn't have a vote, doesn't have a veto, so with what authority do you say no?
Well, I think first of all, as a businessman, I look at the office of Lieutenant Governor as a wonderful opportunity to partner with and support Governor Haley, someone I worked hard for 4 years ago for her election and whose leadership I have a great deal of confidence in. That said, as a businessman, I also believe that the Lieutenant Governor can be an advocate. You can be an advocate behind the scenes. You can be an advocate in talking with people throughout the business community, throughout state government, and with the governor to advocate for things that will help our small business community through lower taxes, through reduced government regulation. And I would like to take this business experience, including my experience in the tourism industry, to simply raise the bar of expectation of what we can and should expect out of a Lieutenant Governor, so that in 4 years, when they start running on the same ticket, we'll have a different perspective on that office.
Thank you. Maya Prabhu has the next question, and we'll start with Mr. Campbell.
The Office on Aging with AARP and other state agencies is hosting the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day Conference next week in West Columbia. Elder abuse and exploitation are growing problems as the population ages. Would you, if nominated and elected, increase initiatives such as the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day Conference that is held next week?
Absolutely, and one thing, as the only individual in this race that has actually been endorsed by a national seniors group, 60 plus, I'm very proud of that, and they did so because of our previous experience and work with seniors issues. So anything that we can do to help promote those issues and confront those issues, I certainly want to do that. And the seniors in our state face an awful lot of issues. We have to, I went through the issue with, as I say, Alzheimer's with my father, and my mother being his sole caregiver, saw the effect that it took on her. So we need to take care of both those patients and the sole caregivers. Make sure that when that sole caregiver is trying to care for that individual, that they're also not becoming a patient themselves. And there are things that we can do to help give them a little relief. One thing that we were very proud to do with the South Carolina Alzheimer's Association was to help be a part of creating the Campbell respite program, which basically allows a little break and a little bit of respite for individuals that cannot financially afford to have somebody come in and give them a break.
Mr. Moore.
Yes, I would support that very strongly. I think our seniors are, in many cases, being preyed upon by unsavory business people trying to take their money and their funds, and so I think that's a very worthy thing, and I would certainly support it. An additional thing I would consider, and I haven't had a chance to see how possible this would be yet, would be trying to get a mentoring program going where our elder population, our seniors who are in good health conditions, could work with some of our problem youth. We have a lot of young people who are getting into gangs now. They're struggling. They don't have good role models in their parents or their grandparents. And mentoring could be a good thing that our senior population could do. They could give back to the community and give back to the future. If they're in good health and would volunteer to do that, we would try to encourage volunteerism. We have an example in that with Senator Tim Scott, who was mentored as a young man by John Moniz, and it's a great classic story of what can be done with mentoring.
Thank you. Mr. McKinney.
Yes, the Office on Aging being the responsibility of the Lieutenant Governor, again, as a businessman, it offers a wonderful opportunity to go in, take a look at each and every aspect of that office, figure out which ones are ones that are effective and where we're getting good value for our money, and then see if there are others that either need to be improved or have those dollars redirected. Additional initiatives will need to come through the partnership with our nonprofit, faith-based and community-based nonprofits, who can many times deliver services to our seniors much more efficiently and at a far less cost than state government. It's a huge issue going forward. Our population of seniors is expected to double by the year 2030. We are going to have to look at innovative ways to get much more out of our dollars going forward.
Mr. McMaster.
Well, Obamacare is not only hurting businesses, large and small, but is also hurting the Medicare program, and is scheduled to take about $780 million out of Medicare and put it over into Medicaid. And we have our seniors who are struggling to get by now, many of them in places other than their homes where they would like to be. The reason I brought the Obamacare lawsuit was to stop that kind of thing. And one thing that we did accomplish there was we allowed the states to make the decisions as whether they wanted to expand Medicaid, which would be very expensive. Governor Haley chose not to, and the legislature, a wise decision, and that's how these different offices can work together. One thing I do specifically is have an abuse unit, a protocol with the Attorney General's office to prosecute people who commit fraud, who commit any sort of physical, emotional, or mental abuse on our seniors.
Thank you. Andy Shane has the next question, and it's for Mr. Moore.
Much of the work at the Office on Aging deals with customer service. What is your experience in handling customer service and handling the public in dealing with these issues? Because you're going to be talking about with resources, with programs, and also with complaints that are going to be coming from seniors for things that they need.
Well, I've been a nearly 4-year congregational minister, so I have a lot of dealing with the public, taking care of people's needs, pastoral experience, in that arena. I've also been an Army chaplain, served 30 years in the Army Reserve and retired as a lieutenant colonel. So I've had experience in that arena. And then we run a small ministry now. I had to take a leave of absence to run for this office, but we've run that ministry for about 15 years to try to grow homeschooling and private Christian schooling, and it's a small national ministry, so we have to deal with the public there. So I've had some experience in knowing how to be nice to people and be kind and be loving and gracious, and so I believe that I would be well able to do that, and look forward to the opportunity.
Mr. McKinney.
Yes, again, as a businessman, we would never have stayed in business successfully over 40 years without good customer service. Caring and effective service begins with the person that answers the telephone and goes right on up through the entire organization. Over the last 8 years, I managed my father's care. Now, I lost him back in April after an 8-year bout with dementia. So I understand firsthand the challenges that our seniors face and the myriad of different departments and organizations that they have to deal with. And I look forward to the challenge of improving customer service in that all-important area.
Mr. McMaster.
Well, customer service is best realized when people simply work hard to do the job to reach those goals. And a lot of times in an agency like this, where you don't have enough money, you must find innovative ways to do it. And usually those innovative ways are better than the ones that require spending a lot of money in the first place. One good example is going on right now over in Sumter. Chief Russell Roark, of the chief over in Sumter, has a program where they have officers who go around to those seniors who want to be on the program, and they check with them every day to see if they need anything, if the locks are working, if they see anything out of order in the house, and they give them that feeling of comfort. They have their telephone numbers. Those are the sorts of innovative things that we can do, but we need a home and community-based program, and we could particularly use the energy of the young people. Every time a young person goes to the house to help an older person, you're changing two lives, the older person and the younger person. It's wide open. There's a lot that we can do.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Well, first of all, I want to say that Lieutenant Governor McConnell has done an outstanding job for our seniors. Like myself, this is a deeply personal issue for him because he lost his mother to Alzheimer's as well. But obviously there's always room. I don't care what it is that we're faced with. There's always room for improvement. And just recently I had a lady come to me and said that her mother had just recently been diagnosed with dementia. And she went out on the web and tried to piecemeal information to try to find out what to expect, where were support groups that she could get involved with, issues of that type, and she was having to put that all together. Well, we could make a more user-friendly Office on the Aging, and that could start right there with that website. That could be the central database and get the stakeholder groups involved, like the Alzheimer's Association, like the folks that are dealing with Parkinson's, the South Carolina In-Home Care Coalition, individuals like that. Let them be the repository of the information, have a central database there, but also we need to make sure that it's senior friendly so that they know how to navigate our website. Also, we could create an Office on Aging app for our smartphones so that people could go to that app that are smartphone savvy and find out information that way.
Let's stay in the Office of Aging because it is a critical part of the Lieutenant Governor's job. And Mr. Campbell mentioned this in passing earlier, respite vouchers. The situation, not only do we have a huge number of elderly in the state, but we have caretakers who are providing for them. An estimated, according to an AARP report, 770,000 caregivers who are under some duress, shall we say, in the process here. So the notion of a respite voucher is something that gives them the opportunity. Someone comes in, takes care of the person they're taking care of, and then they're able to get on for a little bit of time with their own business or even just catch their breath. What's your view on respite vouchers? Would you support it with funds, and to what degree? Be as specific as you can, Mr. Moore.
Yes, I think it's a good idea. I don't know to what degree, but I think the idea of some support, respite care is important. My wife and I cared for my father. He lived with us for the last 6.5 years of his life, and he was doing very, very well until about 6 months before he passed away. And it was tough, those 6 months on us. We had to have people come in at night to care for him because he would fall out of bed, and care for him and keep him sort of help him while he was sleeping so he wouldn't hurt himself, so we could rest. And we were under a lot of stress, and we enjoyed caring for him. It was our privilege to do, but I can certainly understand the need for respite care, and I would wholeheartedly endorse the idea.
Mr. McKinney.
Certainly, the idea of being able to encourage our caregivers, allowing them to keep their loved one in the home much longer than as opposed to having to go to some kind of institutional care is something that Lieutenant Governor McConnell focused on, and I would certainly want to continue that focus. It's very cost effective for our state. It's also very family friendly. I was just today in Orangeburg and spoke to a gentleman that was involved with one of the nonprofits like I spoke about earlier. And one of the things they do is they provide an opportunity to take care of dementia patients during the day, a couple of days a week, 3 or 4 hours at a time, just to give the caregivers a chance to have a break. And so it's those kinds of initiatives, as well as the idea of vouchers, that we can do a much better job of going forward in our state.
Mr. McMaster.
Well, we really can't do enough for the seniors in our state. One thing I would propose is to help them stay in their homes safe and secure for as long as possible, is to reduce the tax burden on them. At some point, people have paid enough taxes, and we could increase the homestead exemption. We ought to eliminate the income tax. Governor Haley has proposed that. I'm for that on everybody, including all of us. But we ought to work out a tax reduction on maybe on retirement pay or maybe on investments or something, so these people, these elders, can stay in their homes longer, because that's where they want to stay. But we have a vast array of organizations. They're community-based, they're faith-based. We have a lot of young people with a lot of energy, could do it as part of their schoolwork. I think we have all the assets. The idea is to use our imaginations, bring them together to help our seniors.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Well, this is actually a great topic. My father-in-law just actually retired from the Office on Aging, and so I've kept in close contact with him about the issues that the Office on Aging faces on a day-to-day basis. What are your top issues that you're hearing back? And he was saying at the top of that list is respite care. And here again, this lends something back to our experience with this, because I have some experience in already having worked with some respite care programs with the Campbell respite program that we created helped create, I should say, with families that financially cannot afford it. But the great thing about the respite care and creating programs like this, it doesn't have to be dependent on government. It's something that we can get, as I say, a lot of the stakeholder groups involved with that will be happy to help support these groups and these programs and to help improve them. And that's one thing that we need to do. And the centers like Memory Matters down in Hilton Head that I just visited the other day, those individuals do great work, and they bring the caregivers and give the caregivers relief.
Next question is from Andy Shane, and it will start with Mr. McKinney.
Despite all the talk this week about whether or not the Lieutenant Governor's office will be filled for the next 6 months or not, one of the responsibilities of the job for one of you or for Democrat Makaria Sellers come January will be that you could serve as governor in case the governor is incapacitated or can't serve. If you are, or if you do become governor, what is your agenda? What are your priorities?
Well, my priorities are very simply the same priorities as Governor Haley. I offered for this office fully expecting to serve 4 years. And I fully commit to serve 4 years. I've had a career in business, not a career in politics. And I look forward to the opportunity to be the Lieutenant Governor and focus on the areas that I spoke of previously, to advocate for our small businesses, continue the push to reform state government, and to advocate for our seniors. And I will serve those 4 years.
Mr. McMaster.
Our campaign for Governor Haley, we got to the point that where I could give her speech and she could give mine almost. And she appointed me to the Ports Authority and also to co-chair with former Attorney General Travis Medlock, the Commission on Ethics Reform. That is one of her main objectives, is one of mine. We can't have business thriving, large or small, here in our state unless the people that want to come here and do business and those that are here understand that government is honest and open. Economic development, she's focusing on big business. I would focus on that as well as small business. There's so many things that need to be done in our state, but we've got 4 years coming in this next term to get a lot of things right that are going to determine our future. And I would work with her, follow up on what she's done, and go from there.
Mr. Campbell.
Well, you know, I would, your top priority as governor should always be jobs, jobs, jobs. I don't care what the issue that you're faced with. If you're not creating jobs, you're not building your economy. And if you're not building your economy, then you don't have the wherewithal to address all the other issues that your state faces. So that's something that I would certainly concentrate on. That was the hallmark of my father's administration. Governor Haley has picked up that mantle, and I would certainly like to do so as well if I got called on to do that. As Lieutenant Governor, I would concentrate on the responsibility that you're charged with, and that is to oversee the Office on Aging. But I do feel like I bring kind of a unique perspective to the governor's office, because I've been exposed to that position. I've seen what it takes not only to do the job, but to do it well, and learn from somebody that I felt like was one of our better leaders in this state, one of the greatest leaders we've had. So I feel like I'm uniquely prepared to step into that role if I had to.
Mr. Moore.
I would, one of the first things I would do is look at the Common Core curriculum and see what the governor's office could do, perhaps an executive order. I'd have to get competent legal advice on that to see what we could do to put a stop to that, because it's harming our children and our schools. I know there's been legislative efforts there. Also, I would try to advance the school choice agenda. We talk about jobs, but if we don't have good workers and people who can read and write and who have good moral values, we're going to fail in attracting good jobs. And I think free market, private, Christian education and home education is going to create a different kind of worker, and our state needs that. And then finally, I would look at trying to advance sound money. I was on the South Carolina Sound Money Committee, and we tried to get a bill through the legislature. It passed the House twice to monetize gold and silver as a backup currency if in case a dollar fails, and we're in real jeopardy there. So that would be one primary thing that I would work on to try to stabilize our financial situation.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Now, Mr. McKinney, you started this round.
Yes, I did.
Maya Prabhu has the next question, and it's for Mr. McMaster.
February 2014 AARP caregiving poll of more than 800 registered South Carolina voters indicated that 79% want information about resources for caregivers in their community. How would you meet that need?
Well, I covered those sorts of things in the plan that I have submitted. Of course, Lieutenant Governor McConnell has drawn up a very fine plan to take us 4 years. It does that, it's done every 4 years. But that's one of the things that can be done without a whole lot of money being spent, and that is to provide information as to where people can go for help. That's one of the reasons Chief Russell Roark, as I mentioned earlier, in Sumter has his police officers going by to see these people who are participating in the program, to see what they need, to see if they need to contact someone, and to stay in touch with them. But what I bring to this, I think, is experience. The things that need to get done in the State House need to be done with people that you know how to get it done. In this race, I am the candidate that has had experience getting laws passed in our government to make things better for the people of our state. I think experience matters in the Lieutenant Governor's office.
Mr. Campbell.
Well, to go back to what I said previously, I think that we already have the state database there with the Office on Aging's website. It exists. There is, if you visit that website, there's an awful lot of information on there, so that is a good starting point for us. But having said that, there is room for improvement. One thing I think that needs to be done is, if you visit the website, there's not really a clear core mission on the website as to tell you what the Office on Aging does. I think that that's something we need to do, but if we improve the website, have the information, collect that information from the stakeholders who are actually out there on the trenches, on the front lines, dealing with these issues on a daily basis, let them be the resource for your information, then you can have a good, solid base of information to be able to provide people. But the key to it is it's got to be user-friendly, and we have to make sure that we specialize it for our seniors.
Mr. Moore?
Yes, I agree with most of what Mike said. The website could be improved, made more user-friendly. More information could be posted. But one thing that might be an additional thing that's not being done widely now is distributing information through our local churches and bringing them into the loop, so to speak. I believe that's an underutilized group. I believe I'll be able to engage pastors and denominational leaders. I've asked some of the leaders of the senior organizations around the state about this. They say churches are doing a lot, but it's sort of on a piecemeal, hit or miss basis. It's not consistent and not widespread enough. So I think that's a resource that I would be able to employ in a better way than it's being currently employed. So a lot of the information could be distributed through our churches, and particularly urging them to do a good job of caring for their members, and then also for those that might need care who do not have family that are taking care of them.
Mr. McKinney?
Since I announced in October for this office, I've spent a lot of that time visiting throughout the state and learning a great deal about the Office on Aging and some of the opportunities that exist there. And yes, there's a great opportunity for information to be dispensed much more efficiently and much more completely. There's an advisory committee on aging, which meets in Columbia several times a year, which I've already met with. There are area advisors on aging around the state, several of whom I have already met with. And one of the things that they have told me is that several years ago they would be brought into Columbia and meet with folks in the state government and would bring ideas, and that hasn't happened as much lately. So I would want to re-engage those people that are out there who are dealing directly with the people our seniors on a day-to-day basis, and use them as the conduit to help engage our community and our faith-based volunteer services. There's a Silverhead Legislators Conference coming up in September for 3 days where they'll be meeting, and I look forward to attending that as well.
Gave you the extra 6 seconds for that promotion for the Silverhead Legislators. Let me stay in the Lieutenant Governor's office because and the Office of Aging, because I think that's the critical piece here. Older South Carolina residents now may get some tax breaks. What is it, 85 years old and you get 1% off of your sales tax. There's the homestead reduction if you're a homeowner. But I'd like to find out from each of you more specifically what you think might be merited in the way of additional tax breaks. Mr. McMaster, in answer to the respite question, jumped into tax breaks. So maybe you can answer the respite question, and I'll ask Mr. Campbell to start on the tax question.
Well, I think that obviously we need to do everything that we can to benefit our seniors and to help create programs. Yes, we can further expand their tax breaks and do things of that nature, but we can also further educate them on things that actually already exist. The other day I had the honor of visiting the Richard Michael Campbell Veterans Home in Anderson, South Carolina, and I'm actually Richard Michael Campbell II. It was named after my uncle who was killed in Vietnam, my dad's only brother. That is a state-run facility, nursing home facility. One of the things that the administrator of the facility was relaying to me was so few people, so few of our seniors realize that facility actually exists, and similar facilities actually exist like that. So I think we could educate that, because as he pointed out to me, he said, you know, Mike, he said, so many of these individuals that don't know that this exists, they're in a senior care facility and they're paying way too much to assist into a system that they should already be benefiting from by being here. So
thank you.
We need to get that word out there to those individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Well, one way probably to benefit seniors would gradually phase out the income tax. I think I support Governor Haley's recent proposal on that. A lot of the seniors are having their wealth that they've built up over the years consumed because of the costly health care. And again, if families can step in and care for them, they won't lose all their accumulated wealth that they have gained over the years, and they can pass that on to their children and to their grandchildren. So I would be in favor of tax breaks and anything to alleviate the wealth of the elderly and our seniors.
Mr. McKinney, senior tax breaks?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to the ones that are already there and the opportunity to make those better known through better communication, I certainly would support the eventual elimination, the reduction now and the eventual elimination of the individual income tax, especially as it relates to our seniors. And also anything we could do to protect them further from any unexpected property tax hikes that might affect their ability to stay in their homes.
Mr. McMaster, any other tax breaks or respite vouchers?
Sure. Well, these kind of they're bad tax breaks, but this is a good tax break. But our taxes are too high. They need to come down. Ronald Reagan proved if you reduce taxes, the production goes up, the economy thrives, and there's more money to go around, even though the tax paid, the burden on everybody is lower. But again, we're going from 900,000 seniors right now to about 1.8 million by the year 2030, and we're not ready for it. And I was speaking to the lady at a nursing home today and cited that figure to her. She worked there for many years, and she couldn't believe it. We're not ready. Glenn McConnell, who I've discussed this at length with, calls it the gray tsunami, and he's right. And we got to get ready for it. And that means we're going to have to use all the community services we have. We have to coordinate and put them together, but it's going to also require legislation. I'm the only one here in this group that has actually gotten legislation through the General Assembly to protect the people of South Carolina, and I aim to continue doing that.
Thank you. Maya Prabhu, the next question is for Mr. Moore.
We mentioned tax breaks, but that same AARP poll that I mentioned earlier found that 71% support increased funding to help older residents live independently. Do you support funding to help older residents live independently in their own homes when needed?
I'm in favor of caring for the elderly, but I agree with Lieutenant Governor McConnell when he said that we're going to have to find alternative ways to meet these needs without an enormous raising of taxes to do it, because the problem is so great, as Henry's already pointed out. We're going to have double the number of seniors in 15 to 20 years that it will overwhelm our financial system. So we've got to create free market alternatives, private alternatives, churches. This is the one untapped resource that's not being used well enough. And so I generally don't want to raise any taxes, but I do want to care for our seniors. So I think that's a little bit of a horn of a dilemma there. I'm not in favor of increasing taxes.
Mr. McKinney?
I agree that we need to engage our community and our faith-based organizations locally to help take care of this growing senior population in our state. And that's why the Office of Innovation that I've proposed through the Office of Lieutenant Governor will be so critical. There are examples of that throughout our state already. 25 years ago, down in the lower part of the state near Beaufort, a group of physicians and healthcare professionals got together and started a free medical clinic down there that serves the uninsured and the underinsured and can deliver services much more efficiently and much more effectively than government can. That has been used as a model throughout the country for 25 more free medical clinics that have been, including one right outside the Charleston area, which I've been glad to support.
Mr. McMaster?
AARP is a very good organization, but I'm sure that response that you just cited is a result of the desperation that a lot of seniors face when they're trying to make ends meet in their homes, because they're scared they're going to lose them. I have not met anyone at any of the long-term or short-term facilities I've been to over my time that wanted to be there. Everybody wants to be home. And that's where all these community services and faith-based things can help the best. But the fact that they would say they want more money like that is and even raise taxes, I guess, for it, is a sign of the desperation. But the government giving away money to people is a bad idea. whether it's the federal government that does it, which has almost ruined the country, state government shouldn't do it either. There are private ways using free enterprise, using the young people, using innovation, using our imagination that can solve this problem. We don't need to be throwing money at it.
Mr. Campbell.
Well, no, look, we need to do everything we can to help make sure that these programs are funded, but that doesn't need to come at the expense of raising taxes. And let's be realistic. People, government is the first one to claim, oh, we don't have the money to do this, we don't have the money to do this, but we all know that there's still plenty of pork in government that can be cut out and benefit these individuals that need to be taken care of. But having said that, there is a role that the private sector needs to play in this and can play, and that's the reason I advocate for having getting the stakeholder groups and having them play a part in that. But look, we need to do everything we can to help the seniors.
I think we have just enough time for one more question, a full round with Andy Shane, and this one would be directed to Mr. McKinney.
A common theme among most of you is your relationship with Governor Haley. Mr. McKinney, Mr. McMaster, you worked on her transition team. You also were appointed to the Ports Authority by her. Mr. Campbell, you spoke at her ceremonial bill signing for the government restructuring, something that your father had started. And Mr. Moore, you had said, of course, you'd back or you work with Governor Haley if she were reelected in November. My question to you is there anything that you disagree with the governor about, or anything that you feel she should be doing differently?
Well, the reason I got into this race, one of the key reasons, was because I respect and have a great deal of admiration for Governor Haley and her leadership. And as such, I believe that the number 2 person in an organization in my business, when I've been number 2 or number 1, you expect number 2 not to do anything that would publicly go against number 1. And so I look forward to the opportunity to work closely with Governor Haley. I don't have any issues on which I disagree with her at this point, but if we were to have one, I would certainly deal with it privately, and then we'd find a solution together.
Mr. McMaster.
I can't think of anything that I disagree with her on. I think she's done an excellent job. She said that she was going to work on economic development, and boy has she. Our unemployment rate has gone down from 10.7, I think, down to 5.5. We're building cars, we're building airplanes, we're building tires, we're now making pharmaceuticals. The whole country is talking about South Carolina. The next 4 years are going to be our time to really grow. That's why I say we need to work hard to set things in place now. I would like to take my experience that I have had in my prosecutor's time in government, state and federal, in getting laws passed and getting things done to the people, for the people of the state, and work with Governor Haley. I think we would make a tremendous team in getting good things done for the state of South Carolina, and I'd be honored to have the vote of the people watching this show to help me do that.
Mr. Campbell.
Well, I've considered Nikki Haley a friend since 2004. I actually supported her when she first ran for state representative on her first run. I know her to be a lady of character and know her to be a lady of vision. And she has taken up where she's said so many times that she wanted to pick up where Carol Campbell left off on economic development, and she's done that. Do I see any area that I would disagree with her on? No, but I'm not going to necessarily pretend to tell her how to do her job as governor. I'm going to stick to my job as lieutenant governor and focus on my responsibility to the seniors and focusing on the Office on Aging. Obviously I would be there to work with her and do whatever she wants me to do and assist her in any way. But as far as economic development and what she's done for economic development and industry expansion in the state, she doesn't need my help. She and the Secretary of Commerce are doing quite fine on their own, and they don't need the Lieutenant Governor's help. So that's the reason I'd like to concentrate on small business, but particularly on the Office on Aging.
Mr. Moore.
I will pray for Governor Haley as I am now as a pastor, and think I would be some help to her there. I would be at her disposal and whatever she might request of me, and I believe I'll be a team player. But I must say, I am not happy with the Republican Party and even the governor's office, and particularly with the churches and the slowness for us to move to a solid private Christian homeschool system. She ran on Tea Party, school choice type issues 4 years ago, and just basically it looks like she's abandoned that and even adopted the Democratic plan on more funds for public schools. You know, if you're running a business and it's failing and you're doing a bad job, you don't say, hey, we're going to raise our prices. But that's what government schooling is doing. They're saying, hey, we're doing a bad job, we're failing, and we're going to raise taxes for more schools. They would do better if we took some of the money away and maybe they would clean up their act. So I'm running basically to offer an alternative and try to have that agenda project itself forward in our state.
Thank you. We have a minute and a half left, which leaves us to do something dicey here as quickly as we can. This is the last time, as we said, that the governor and lieutenant governor will be elected separately. Nothing in politics is certain. It's conceivable one of you could be elected lieutenant governor and Vince Shaheen could be elected governor of South Carolina. How would you make that work? In about 10 seconds, Mr. Starting with you, sir.
Henry McMaster.
McMaster, yes, I knew that. Thank you.
I would say that there is a possibility that my friend Vince Shaheen will get elected governor, but I would say it's very slight. I would say Governor Haley has done a superlative job. She's done everything she said she was going to do and more. But you have to work in the office to do whatever's necessary to get the things done for the people.
10 seconds, Mr. Campbell. What could you do with it?
I would do exactly what my dad did. He had a Democratic lieutenant governor when he was governor. They worked well together, but the things that they disagreed on, he stood up and they politely disagreed and stood their position, but they had a good working relationship, and I would do that.
10 seconds, Mr. Moore.
I would work with him on things that he was right and correct on, but I don't think there would be too many of those. So generally, I think I would offer an alternative voice for traditional values and conservative values.
10 seconds, Mr. McKinney.
I look forward to working very hard to ensure the re-election of Governor Haley. And however, as a businessman, I've worked with a lot of diverse people throughout my life, and I'm sure we could work together.
Gentlemen, thank you all very much for being with us tonight. Thanks as well to Maya Prabhu and Andy Shane. For more information on upcoming ETV debates, visit scetv.org. For everyone at ETV, thanks for being with us. I'm Charles Bierbauer.